Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
Today we're diving into something pretty amazing, actually.
Right.
It's about how these placental tissues, the stuff we usually just toss after birth,
Right.
could actually be like the key to some huge breakthroughs in regenerative medicine.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible stuff.
So we've been digging into some research
Well,
and,
let's to unpack.
oh yeah, definitely. Let's get right into it.
Sounds good.
I gotta admit, I always thought the placenta was, just one thing.
Yeah, I get that. It's a common misconception.
But it turns out, when we're talking about placental tissues for medicine,
Hmm.
we're actually talking about
A whole package deal, really.
a whole package deal.
Yeah.
Okay. So what's all included in this package?
So you've got the placental membrane itself, of course.
Right.
But there's also the umbilical cord,
Oh, wow.
and even the amniotic fluid has some amazing potential.
So it's not just about the placenta itself.
Nope, it's way more than that.
Yeah, that's already news to me. What makes all of this so interesting for medicine then?
Well, for one, it's readily available, which is a huge plus.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But what's really fascinating is that these tissues are consistently young.
Young, what does that mean exactly?
Basically, they have a high regenerative potential because they haven't been around as long,
Ah, okay, so they're like fresh out of the box.
Precisely. And here's the real kicker. They're considered immune privileged.
Immune privilege, that sounds pretty fancy.
It is. It means they're less likely to trigger an immune response compared to, say, a regular organ transplant.
So does that mean they can be transplanted without any risk of rejection?
Well, it's not quite that simple.
Okay.
But the fact that they're immune privileged opens up a whole world of possibilities in regenerative medicine.
I see. So it's a big deal, but there's still a lot to figure out.
Absolutely. It's a rapidly evolving field.
Okay, I'm definitely intrigued. Let's break it down a bit more.
Sure thing.
What about the placental membrane? I understand it's already been used in medicine for, like, a long time.
Oh, yeah. The placental membrane has quite the history, especially in wound healing. It goes all the way back to the early 1900s, actually.
Wow, that's way before modern medicine as we know it.
Exactly. And it's still used today because it's so effective.
So what makes it so good at healing?
Well, it has this unique structure. It's made up of 3 layers.
3 layers. It's like a naturally engineered bandage or something.
That's a great way to put it. It's got the amnion, the chorion, and an intermediate layer in between.
And each of these layers does something different.
They all contribute to the membrane's remarkable healing properties. Yep.
Okay, tell me more about these properties. Like, what makes it so good at, actually healing wounds?
So take the amnion layer, for example.
Yeah.
It's known for its anti-inflammatory properties.
Oh, that's interesting.
Think about those chronic wounds that just won't heal,
Yeah.
Often it's because they're stuck in this constant state of inflammation.
Yeah, I see.
And the amnion can actually help to break that cycle.
So it's not just covering the wound, it's actively like promoting healing from the inside out.
Exactly. Plus, the entire placental membrane is full of these things called growth factors.
Growth factors. I've heard of those.
They're like little chemical messengers
Okay.
that tell the cells in your body to grow and repair.
Oh, that makes sense.
And placental membrane basically acts as a scaffold,
Like a support system.
Yeah, exactly. It supports the growth of new tissue and helps to keep scarring to a minimum.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. So are there like specific examples of how it's being used in medicine today?
Oh, absolutely. One of the most promising applications is in burn dressings.
Burn dressings. Okay.
Studies have shown that placental membrane dressings can actually speed up the healing time significantly.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And I guess less scarring is a huge deal for burn victims.
It makes a world of difference.
It sounds like the placental membrane is like this multitasking superhero of wound care.
It really is.
Okay, let's move on to amniotic fluid now.
Why?
I always thought its main job was to protect the baby in the womb, like a cushion.
That's definitely true. But it turns out it's way more than just a cushion. It's full of healing potential, too.
Really?
For example, it's rich in hyaluronic acid.
Hyaluronic acid.
Yeah.
Isn't that what they put in all those fancy skincare products?
That's the one. It's a superstar ingredient in skincare because it's so good at hydrating.
Yeah, I've heard it's supposed to keep your skin plump and hydrated.
Exactly. And it does the same thing in our bodies naturally.
Oh, right. It's found naturally in our joints, isn't it?
Yep, it acts as a lubricant, helping our joints move smoothly.
So, wait, are you telling me that the same stuff that keeps babies comfy in the womb can help with, like, arthritis?
Well, researchers are definitely exploring that. The hyaluronic acid in amniotic fluid could have huge potential for treating osteoarthritis and other joint conditions.
So it's like giving your joints a little boost of natural lubrication.
You got it.
I could see how that would be
Yeah.
super helpful.
And it's not just the hyaluronic acid either. Amniotic fluid also has those growth factors we talked about earlier.
Right, those little chemical messengers that tell cells to repair themselves.
Exactly. So it's got wound healing properties too.
It sounds like amniotic fluid is like this liquid healing potion.
Kind of is. And it's already being used in some exciting treatments.
Like what?
One really promising area is in tendon injuries.
No?
Injections of amniotic fluid can actually help to promote cartilage regeneration and speed up the healing process.
So we've got the membrane and the amniotic fluid covered. What about the umbilical cord? I'm guessing there's something special about that too, right?
You bet. The umbilical cord is way more than just a lifeline.
I have a feeling you're going to say it's another source of those amazing growth factors.
You're getting good at this.
Ugh.
But the umbilical cord's claim to fame is actually something called Wharton's jelly.
Wharton's jelly. That's the jelly-like stuff that surrounds the blood vessels in the cord, right?
Exactly.
And why is Wharton's jelly so special?
Well, it's packed with collagen.
Collagen, like what's in our skin.
The very same. And of course, you guessed it, more hyaluronic acid.
So we've got that hydration and lubrication power from hyaluronic acid again.
Yep.
Plus the structural support of collagen.
It's a winning combination for sure.
I can only imagine. So what kind of real-world applications are we talking about here?
Well, researchers are looking into using Wharton's jelly to make what we call bioscaffolds for tissue engineering.
Bioscaffolds. Those sound intense.
Think of them like a framework.
Okay.
We can use them to encourage the growth of new tissues.
So we're talking about building new tissues from scratch here. Almost like a 3D printer for the human body.
That's a great analogy. And there are already some pretty promising results.
Oh, really?
Umbilical cord tissue is being used to create these scaffolds for cartilage repair, bone regeneration, even wound healing.
This is all so fascinating. So far, we've covered the membrane, amniotic fluid, the umbilical cord.
Yep.
What about the placental disc itself? Is there anything special about that, or is that the part we usually just discard?
Definitely not just discard. The placental disc is like the central command center of pregnancy.
What do you mean?
It's where all the exchange of nutrients and oxygen between the mother and baby happens.
Right, it's like the grand central station of pregnancy.
Exactly. But it's also got this incredibly complex network of blood vessels and something called an extracellular matrix.
Extracellular matrix, that sounds complicated.
It's basically a structural framework that supports all the cells.
Okay, so how does this all tie back to regenerative medicine?
Well, researchers are trying to figure out how to use this unique structure to grow new tissues.
Oh, wow.
And potentially even entire organs.
Wait, are we talking about actually growing organs from placental tissue? That sounds straight out of science fiction.
It does, doesn't it?
Oh.
But it's an area of active research right now.
No way. Are they actually doing it already?
There are experiments happening. For example, some researchers are using the placental disc as a scaffold to try to grow liver tissue.
That's mind-blowing. I had no idea all of this was even possible.
It's pretty remarkable what these tissues can do, right?
It's incredible to think that we usually just throw all of this away.
I know.
It could have such a huge impact on medicine.
It's a game changer for sure.
And it's not just the medical potential that's exciting.
Right.
It's also super sustainable.
Huge bonus.
Taking something that would normally be medical waste and turning it into like this valuable resource.
It's a win-win.
It's really amazing to see how science is finding ways to use readily available resources to improve human health.
It's inspiring.
And at the same time, it's being mindful of our planet.
Exactly. We need more of that.
This is all so cool. What else is there to learn about this whole placental tissue revolution?
Oh, we're just getting started. There's a lot more to uncover.
Well, I can't wait to hear more.
You're in for a treat.
I'm hooked already.
Great.
So where do we go from here? What else is there to learn?
Well, up until now, we've been talking about the individual components, like the membrane, the fluid, the core. But researchers are also starting to get really creative and combine those components.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's like mixing and matching to make even more targeted therapies.
Ooh, that's a cool idea.
So remember those growth factors we discussed?
The little messengers that tell cells to heal.
Yeah, exactly. Well, both the placental membrane and the amniotic fluid are packed with them.
Right. I'm starting to see where you're going with this.
So researchers are now creating these injectable therapies
Okay.
that combine micronized placental membrane with components from amniotic fluid, like those helpful amniotic cells.
It's like they're creating a super concentrated healing serum.
That's a great way to think about it.
And you can deliver it exactly where it's needed.
Precisely. And this approach is showing a lot of promise in treating things like osteoarthritis.
So instead of just masking the pain, these therapies are going after the root of the problem.
Exactly. They're targeting that damaged cartilage.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And I bet the hyaluronic acid helps with that too, right?
You know it. It can really help improve joint function.
It's like a spa treatment for your joints, but with long-lasting benefits.
I like that analogy.
So what other cool combinations are they exploring?
Well, there's also a lot of research focused on combining placental tissues with other biomaterials
Right.
to create even more advanced scaffolds for tissue engineering.
So it's taking those bioprinting ideas to a whole new level.
Exactly. For example, some researchers are using something called silk fibroin.
Silk fibroin? What's that?
It's actually a protein derived from silkworms.
Silkworm protein. Now that's unexpected.
I know, right? Sounds kind of strange.
Yeah.
But silk fibroin is a fantastic biomaterial. It's strong, flexible, and biocompatible.
So it makes a good foundation, and then they add the placental tissue extracts for an extra healing boost.
You got it.
Smart. So what kind of results are they seeing with these silkworm scaffolds?
Pretty impressive ones. They've found that these hybrid scaffolds can significantly improve wound healing.
Yeah.
They even help with new blood vessel formation and skin regeneration.
It sounds like finding the right combination of natural and bioengineered materials is key.
Absolutely. It's all about working with nature to create the most effective treatment.
This is so exciting. It feels like with placental tissues, the possibilities for regenerative medicine are endless.
I think you're right. As we learn more about these tissues, who knows what we'll be able to achieve.
This is awesome. But I do have a question. We're talking about tissues that come from pregnancies, right?
Right.
So I can't help but wonder about the ethical considerations.
That's a very important point, and I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah, how can we make sure that using these tissues is being done ethically and responsibly?
Well, it all starts with informed consent.
Okay.
Donors need to be fully aware of how their tissues will be used and give their clear permission.
That makes perfect sense. They need to be able to make a truly informed decision.
Exactly. And there are strict guidelines in place to make sure that happens.
So this isn't like some shady operation happening in a back alley.
Not at all. There are regulations that govern everything.
Okay, good.
From the collection and processing to the storage of these tissues. It's all about ensuring both safety and quality control.
I'm really glad to hear that. It's important to be ethical and responsible, especially when we're talking about something as potentially groundbreaking as this.
Absolutely. It's a responsibility we all share as we explore the potential of placental tissues for regenerative medicine.
This deep dive has already been a wild ride. I can't believe we've only just scratched the surface.
There's so much more to come.
Seriously. I'm blown away by everything we've talked about already.
Good. I'm glad you're enjoying it.
What's the biggest takeaway for you from everything we've discussed so far?
For me, it's that this is just the beginning.
Yeah.
We're only starting to understand the true potential of placental tissues.
Right.
And as research continues, I think we can expect to see even more innovative and effective treatments.
It's like we're on the verge of a whole new frontier in medicine.
I think so too.
And placental tissues are right there at the forefront.
Leading the way.
I'm so curious to see what the future holds. What areas do you think hold the most promise for future breakthroughs?
Well, organ regeneration is a really exciting one.
Oh, yeah. That example with growing liver tissue on a placental disc scaffold was mind-blowing.
It really shows you the possibilities.
Imagine a future where we can grow entire organs for transplants.
That'd be incredible.
No more waiting lists, no more people dying while they wait for a life-saving organ.
It's a bold vision, but it's becoming more and more realistic.
That's so hopeful.
And it's not just organ regeneration. Placental tissues could transform the treatment of spinal cord injuries, autoimmune diseases.
Wow.
The list goes on.
It's amazing to think that something we used to see as medical waste could be the key to such incredible breakthroughs.
It really speaks to the power of science and innovation.
I totally agree. Who knows what other amazing discoveries are waiting for us as we continue to explore this?
I can't wait to find out.
Me neither. This deep dive has been truly fascinating, and I'm leaving with a newfound sense of awe and wonder.
That's great to hear.
Thanks so much for taking us on this journey with you.
It's my pleasure.
And to all our listeners, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of placental tissue research.
See you next time.
Until then, Keep those minds curious and those hearts hopeful.
Absolutely.
It really is remarkable how much progress has been made in this field in such a short time.
It is. But as with any emerging field, there are bound to be challenges along the way as we try to fully unlock the power of placental tissues.
What kind of challenges are we talking about?
One of the biggest hurdles is standardization.
Standardization.
Yeah, every placenta is unique, you see.
Oh, all right.
And the composition of these tissues can vary quite a bit.
I guess things like the mother's health and the stage of pregnancy could all play a role.
Exactly. So it's not a one-size-fits-all situation.
Makes sense.
Researchers are working hard to develop better methods for characterizing and classifying these tissues.
So we can make sure the treatments are more consistent.
Precisely. We want predictable outcomes for patients.
That's fascinating. It's like creating a detailed profile for each placenta so we can tailor the treatment accordingly.
That's a great way to put it.
What other challenges are researchers facing?
Well, scalability is another big one.
Scalability.
Right now, most placental tissue therapies are being developed on a relatively small scale.
Okay.
If we want to make these treatments widely accessible, we need to figure out how to produce them on a much larger scale.
So it's like having this amazing recipe, but needing a bigger kitchen to feed everyone who could benefit.
That's a perfect analogy.
So how do we scale up production?
One promising strategy is biobanking.
Biobanking, what's that?
It involves collecting and storing placental tissues under very carefully controlled conditions.
I see.
That way they can be used for research and treatment development in the future.
So it's like creating a library of placental tissues, each with its own unique set of properties.
Exactly.
That's a really cool idea.
It is, and it allows researchers to study the long-term effects of these tissues and develop even safer and more effective treatments.
Speaking of safety, are there any potential risks or concerns associated with using placental tissues that we should be aware of?
That's a great question, and it's one we need to take seriously.
Of course.
Because these tissues come from a human source, one theoretical concern is the potential for disease transmission.
Right, that makes sense.
So how do we ensure that these tissues are safe for transplantation?
Yeah, what kind of safeguards are in place?
Well, there are very rigorous screening procedures, for starters.
Okay,
Donors are carefully screened for infectious diseases.
makes sense.
And then the tissues themselves undergo extensive testing to make absolutely sure they're free from any harmful pathogens.
So it's a multi-layered approach to safety, from donor screening to tissue testing.
Exactly. We want to minimize any potential risks.
That's really reassuring to hear.
And as research progresses, we're constantly learning more about how to further mitigate any potential risks.
This has been an incredibly enlightening deep dive. From the surprising properties of these often discarded tissues to the challenges and possibilities that lie ahead, we've covered a lot of ground.
It's been quite the journey.
What's the biggest takeaway for you from everything we've discussed so far?
For me, it's the realization that we're really just at the beginning of this journey.
The beginning.
We're only starting to grasp the full potential of placental tissues.
There's so much more to discover.
Exactly. And as research continues, I think we can expect to see even more innovative and effective treatments emerging in the years to come.
It's like we're standing at the edge of a whole new frontier in medicine.
I agree. It's an exciting time to be in this field.
And placental tissues are leading the way.
They truly are.
What areas do you think hold the most promise for future breakthroughs?
Well, organ regeneration is a particularly exciting area, wouldn't you say?
Well, absolutely. Remember that example we discussed about growing liver tissue on a placental disc scaffold?
Of course. That was amazing.
That's just a glimpse of what might be possible.
Right.
Imagine a future where we can grow entire organs for transplantation.
It's mind-boggling.
No more waiting lists for organ transplants. No more tragic stories of people dying while waiting for a life-saving organ.
It's a bold vision, but one that's becoming more realistic with each scientific advancement.
And beyond organ regeneration, placental tissues have the potential to transform the treatment of so many conditions,
Absolutely.
from spinal cord injuries to autoimmune diseases.
The possibilities are endless.
It's incredible to think that something we used to discard as medical waste could hold the key to such groundbreaking medical advances.
I know. It's a real testament to the power of scientific curiosity and innovation.
I completely agree. Who knows what other amazing discoveries await us as we continue to explore the incredible world of placental tissues.
I can't wait to find out.
Me neither. This has been a truly fascinating deep dive, and I'm leaving with a renewed sense of awe and wonder at the potential of these remarkable tissues.
I'm glad to hear that.
Thanks for taking us on this journey.
It was my pleasure.
And to our listeners, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of placental tissue research.
Until next time.
Until next time, keep those minds curious and those hearts hopeful.
Absolutely.
It really is incredible to think about all the progress that's been made in this field in such a short time.
I know, right? It's remarkable. But like with any new field, there are always going to be challenges.
Right, of course. So what kind of challenges are we up against as we, try to unlock the full power of placental tissues?
Well, one of the biggest ones is standardization.
Standardization. Okay. What do you mean by that?
Well, every placenta is unique, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So the exact makeup of these tissues can vary quite a bit.
Right. Like, I guess things like the mother's health during pregnancy could affect it.
Exactly. And even things like how far along the pregnancy was when the tissues were collected.
Ah, okay. I see.
So it's definitely not a one-size-fits-all situation.
So how do researchers deal with that?
They're working on developing better ways to characterize and classify these tissues.
So we can make sure the treatments are consistent.
Precisely. We want predictable outcomes for patients.
That makes sense.
And that's a big part of standardization.
It's like creating a detailed profile for each placenta, right?
You got it.
So that we can really tailor the treatment.
Exactly.
That's fascinating. What are the challenges are researchers working on?
Well, scalability is a big one.
Scalability.
Yeah. Right now, most of these placental tissue therapies are being developed on a pretty small scale.
Uh-huh.
But if we want to make these treatments available to everyone who needs them, we need to figure out how to produce them on a much larger scale.
It's like having this amazing recipe, but you need a bigger kitchen if you want to feed everybody, right?
That's a perfect analogy.
So how do we scale up production?
Well, one promising approach is biobanking.
Biobanking. What's that?
It basically involves collecting and storing placental tissues under very carefully controlled conditions so they can be used for research and treatment development down the road.
So it's like a library of placental tissues.
Exactly.
Each one with its own unique properties.
Right. And that allows researchers to study them,
Yeah.
see their long-term effects,
Right.
develop safer and more effective treatments.
That's a really cool idea. I like that.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Speaking of safety, are there any potential risks or concerns with using these tissues? Since they come from a human source.
That's a great question, and it's an important one.
Of course.
Because, anytime you're dealing with human tissues, there's always a theoretical risk of disease transmission.
Right. That makes sense.
So we have to be really careful.
Yeah. What kind of safeguards are in place?
Well, there are incredibly rigorous screening procedures.
Okay.
Donors are very carefully screened for any infectious diseases.
That makes sense.
And then on top of that, the tissues themselves go through extensive testing.
Wow.
We have to make absolutely sure that they're free from any harmful pathogens.
So it's like a multi-layered approach to safety.
Yeah, exactly. From donor screening to tissue testing.
Well, that's definitely reassuring.
And as research moves forward, we're constantly learning more.
Yeah.
Finding new ways to make sure these therapies are as safe as possible.
That's great. This whole deep dive has been amazing. It's incredible to think that these placental tissues, something we used to just discard as medical waste,
I know.
could be so important for the future of medicine.
It's truly revolutionary.
What's the biggest takeaway for you from everything we've talked about?
I think the most exciting part is that we're really just at the beginning of this whole journey.
We've only just scratched the surface.
Exactly. There's so much more to discover, and as research continues, I think we can expect to see even more innovative and effective treatments.
It's like we're on the verge of a whole new frontier in medicine.
I agree. It's an incredible time to be in this field.
And placental tissues are leading the way. What areas do you think hold the most promise for the future?
Organ regeneration is a big one, for sure.
Oh, yeah. That example with growing liver tissue is incredible.
Right. It just shows you what might be possible.
Imagine a future where we can grow entire organs for transplantation.
Wow, that would be amazing.
No more waiting lists. No more people dying while they wait for a life-saving organ.
It's a bold vision, but it's becoming more and more realistic with every new scientific advancement.
And it's not just organ regeneration. We talked about spinal cord injuries, autoimmune diseases.
Yeah, placental tissues could really change the way we treat those conditions.
It's just incredible to think about all the possibilities.
I know, it's mind-blowing.
It really is. Well, this has been a truly fascinating deep dive, and I'm leaving with a renewed sense of hope for the future of medicine.
Me too. It's an exciting time.
Thanks so much for sharing your expertise with us.
It was my pleasure.
And to all our listeners, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of placental tissue research. Until next time, keep those minds curious and those hearts hopeful.
Absolutely.